to be okay with being uncomfortable. Because if you didn't notice that you're a fat piece of shit when you look in the mirror, if you didn't notice you're a skinny bitch when you look in the mirror, if you didn't notice that you're in a constant state of uncomfortability, but then you stuff it in your subconscious mind and then consciously pretend like it doesn't exist, like it's not fucking there, like no one's aware to the fact that you're that. And remember that you are a reflection of you. So when you look in the mirror and you reflect what you are, because we know that you inhabit your mind and your body is just your vessel, but that vessel is a reflection of you. So you can, pretend to be inconspicuous and hide behind, the whatever you shoe yourself with. But remember that we notice you're uncomfortable and you just stuff it in the back of your mind. So my message today is be okay with being uncomfortable, because if you're uncomfortable and you pretend like you're not uncomfortable, then the uncomfortability is going to manifest out of your mind as insecurity. So when we look at an insecure individual, that's really just mental inferiority, but not just mental inferiority, it's mental infertility. Because as an individual, as a man especially, you should be grounded and you should be able to move in directions you want to move towards without being uncomfortable. So when you stand up and, we see the flesh sack and the, fat that hangs off of your belly and your stomach, and you look like a fucking bowling ball. You look like Santa Claus. You look like ho, 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 Santa Claus. Well, you have to understand that if you can't stand up and pretend like, you have to pretend like you're not insecure, then there's a fucking problem, and the problem is you. And if there's a problem, that means there's something to be solved, and there's something that must be dissolved, right? So when we look in the mirror and we don't see the individual we see a fat, out of shape, addicted, broke, downhill slope joke that is really just going to repeat the sequencing. So the habits, the daily habits that ensures he remains mentally inferior. Because you have to understand that mental inferiority is what plagues the human race. And so as long as we can eradicate that, then we will proliferate through time and space. So most of these people go through their entire lives uncomfortable. And so when people are uncomfortable and they don't realize that they're uncomfortable, so they're unaware, and their baseline awareness is under the threshold of being aware to the fact that they're uncomfortable. So they're so uncomfortable with themselves that their baseline awareness of what they are aware of, so their existential awareness that should be increasing, has decreased below the capacity of being able to be aware to the fact that they're fat, out of shape, and a divine mistake. So you're either gonna rise in existential awareness and proliferate what you've been neglecting, which is whatever you see in the mirror, and you're gonna actually take actionable steps to acquire momentum and compound the daily habits that would eradicate what is making you feel uncomfortable. And you're going to do that by holding yourself accountable for what you see in the mirror instead of neglecting it. Because to live your life uncomfortable, now you're seeking what make other people uncomfortable. So when we look at an insecure individual, they will project what makes them feel insecure into the external world or the atmosphere, because they don't feel comfortable in themselves. And the misery loves company, right? Misery loves company. And so if someone is uncomfortable in themselves, they will seek what makes someone else uncomfortable to feel as if it's okay to be uncomfortable. And this is all being automated subconsciously because the individual is unaware to the fact their baseline awareness is below the threshold and the capacity to be able to facilitate a fucking neuron to fire in the direction to allow them to recognize that they're uncomfortable as fuck because they're not in the body they desire to inhabit, which would be a consequence of their daily habits. So you have to understand that you have to respond with responsibility to the, life's baggage, or you're going to walk around with a bag full and, a stomach full. And you don't want a stomach full when, your stomach is full when it's not full. So, you're going to have to understand that everyone has problems to solve, and some problems take more time to solve. It's all time and energy. You have specific problems in your life, And the only reason you exist is to solve those problems. And when you solve a problem, you move on to the next level, and you're amplified, you level up, because to solve certain degrees of problems will allow you to rise in self-esteem. And through that self-esteem, aka confidence, you're able to execute things more proficiently and better. So when we look at an individual who is first starting out on sales, and he can't make any sales because he's not confident, because he's inexperienced, he hasn't done it before, the individual who has confidence in sales is going to make more sales because he's confident. So when we look at confidence, it's really a level. You can compare confidence to a level of proliferation. And so you have to eradicate what is hindering your confidence, because the opposite of confidence, because remember, we live in a reality of polarity, hot and cold, good and bad, north and south, right? So we have to understand that the polarity of confidence is insecurity. And the more confident you are, the more you feel better about yourself. And if you feel better about yourself, you're naturally going to project positive, constructive energy into the atmosphere. But the worse you feel about yourself, because remember that if you feel better, that means you feel good. And if you feel worse, that means you feel bad. And when we look at generative principles and we look at how the universe operates on a scale of creation, we have to understand that negative is a force of hatred to deplete and to push away and to disintegrate something, right? It's a destructive force, right? And not destructive as in behavior, but destructive as in, if I throw a bomb at a grenade, if I throw a bomb at a car, I throw a grenade at a car, the car is going to be destroyed. It's going to explode. That's a destructive generative force, right? And then when we look at the polarity of that, we have healing, we have good, we have positive, constructive energy, which is going to build. So we have destroying energy and we have building energy. And when we look at certain individuals, they are operating on a modality of destroying themselves without the conscious capacity to be aware to the fact that they hate themselves in the back of their mind, because they're uncomfortable and insecure with who they are. So you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to understand that that is you. And you're not going to pretend like it's not there, because everyone can see it, right? Your mom sees it. Your sister sees it. Your friends see it. Your coworkers see it. Your kids see it. Your father sees it. Your grandpa sees it. Your grandma sees it. Your uncle sees it. Your nephew sees it. The strangers see it. And you have to accept that people see it. And the moment you accept it, now you can take it upon yourself to carry the baggage of removing that destructive force, because now we're going to look at your metaphysical arsenal, aka your mind. And you have to understand that the mind is a tool. And if we are operating from two generative forces, so construction and destruction, we have to understand that if your mind isn't constructing, if you are not ridding what is destroying you, because you have mental inhabitations, so your mind is inhabiting, you inhabit your habits. So this is why daily habits are so important. You're inhabiting your habits because what you do is inhabiting your mind, so you can execute it into the external world. So if you're not conscious of what's inhabiting your mind, and your awareness, your existential awareness is below the threshold to be aware of what is inhabiting your mind, then you're going to naturally have things that are destroying you, destructive concepts, destructive actions. And remember that every motivation, a motivation is just a force of creating momentum, or something to what do you call this? What would you call this? Friction. Motivation is friction. So the more friction you have to get something done, the better you're most likely going to be able to execute it. And then within the motivation are underlying reasons that are causing friction, which are going to send emotional currents into your mind, which is going to correspond to impulses, which you're going to react to consciously, and then you're going to go out into the world to fulfill those impulses. Now, if you are unaware of what is motivating you, because remember, motivation isn't this emotional feeling you feel when you want to make a change in your life. No, motivation is the underlying momentum force, the gravitational pull towards a specific activity, which is going to correspond to specific outcomes. So are you aligned with the outcome of destroying yourself while being unaware to the fact that you are uncomfortable with, and you're uncomfortable, and then you pretend not to be uncomfortable? So you're not even comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable, and then your baseline awareness is below the capacity to realize the fact you're uncomfortable. And this is why, again, we need to expand our baseline awareness to the fact that, to the points and facts that we could concrete and be able to point out what is hindering us and what is allowing us to expand, right? Because everything is about expansion. You see it in history, you see it in time and space, from nothing to something, right? From nothing to literally everything. It was first nothing, and then the universe exploded, and it started to expand as space literally continues to expand. Life is about expansion. How do you expand? You expand your existential awareness as a human, right? Because this is existential competence, and this is brought to you by a fucking Super Saiyan individual who has gone out from the... Remember who you're dealing with, right? Remember who the fuck I am. I took a train from Virginia, right, and to LA, and then while being homeless, because remember we had a video about this, made an online business, and while having the online business, made 10K. And now, since I delimited my existence, I don't have any limiting factors in my mind that are inhibiting and contracting me to stay in a certain level. So when we look at people who live limited existence, their mind is limited to a certain state of awareness, and then your vibration and frequency and your quantum coherency is dissonant. So just remember who the fuck you're dealing with. You're dealing with a self-made fucking boss. And, you know, people are going to go their entire lives without realizing the fact that, you know, you can sleep on a bench, you can make money, and then you can go wherever the fuck you want in the world. Like, it's like you have to you have to be okay with disconnecting to society. But if you can't even realize the fact you're uncomfortable with being you, then you're never going to disconnect, because now you have to rely on external things to feel comfortable instead of being centered in self. You are self-centered, right? So that's a whole different video. Remember that existential competence, the competence you lack, is the root of your suffering. So link in the description. You can get your mind right, you can get your body right. We will assign you habits to get your mind right, and then we will give you information to interfer and integrate to your mind's interferometry on how to level up instead of remain whatever the fuck that is. And you don't want to be that, because if you wanted to be that, you wouldn't be uncomfortable being yourself. You wouldn't hinder yourself and inhibit and contract your own consciousness and hinder your self-expression because of what other things, other entities, existential beings. Literally, you have to literally just find God. And, you know, if you're not self-developing, you're definitely not going to find God. And if you're not conquering the world by conquering yourself, then you're definitely not going to find God. So all this church shit is bullshit. You better look in that fucking mirror and realize you're a fat ass bitch. And, you know, that's how you'll find God. When you're doing everything in your fucking ability to actually match the standard of what God would have you do if you were in a certain situation. God doesn't want you to be whatever that is. Definitely doesn't want you to remain in the same position your entire life. God wants you to go out into the world, see what you can conquer, and put your fucking foot on its neck and grab it by the throat and lift that shit the fuck up. And if you can't do that, shut the fuck up, sit the fuck down, and remember you're my inferior. Peace!